is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Donnie, Alex, Jeremy, and Jeff Burton.
Well, looky here. It is a Friday in St. Louis. It is cold as hell outside.
Oh, yeah.
It is perfect time to talk about our St. Louis Blues. Joining me in the studio from The Athletic, Jeremy Rutherford from 101 ESPN, handling everything. I cannot imagine the type of people that would boo either one of you. Like, I could see how people genuinely don't like me.
My wife. Let me show you the text line during our show.
But I'm just saying, you're just such nice guys. People that are that way, they don't even know. I'm a douche. I understand why some people don't like me. I get it.
Speaking of which, we were at Queenie Park. Queenie has a roller hockey rink. We were there last weekend, and I went up to get a cocktail at the bar there. And the gentleman was super nice, and he said, "Hey, I read The Athletic. I read your stories. You know, it's fun to follow the coverage." And I said, "Can you hold on for 1 second?" And I go, "Hey, Sarah, what do you want? Did you want a nacho and a soda? Come here for a second. Come here for a second." I go, "Could you say that again real quick?"
Can I tell you a terrible story about me playing roller hockey at Queenie Park?
Oh, absolutely.
This is so embarrassing.
I want bad stories.
So this is early. I'm in my early 20s, and I had this regular group of guys that we played roller hockey with on a very regular basis, and we were pretty
average.
No, I was terrible. These guys were really good. I just
You were
actually
the beer guy.
I was totally just on the team because they liked me.
That's why I play softball.
100%.
Bring the beer.
So there is this one particular game where I am worse than normal, and I'm getting ready to go off of the rink, to not my, other shift coming on, I'm going off. And so I throw my stick into the bench because I'm so disgusted with myself.
Nice. It's a good start.
I hit my friend Jason Disco square in the head, and he has to go and get 8 stitches in the middle of his head because of where I haphazardly threw my stick and leading. I have done dumb things in my life, clearly. I have done things that I have felt very bad about. That one, almost absolutely the worst. Yeah. So what makes this almost kind of funny is fast forward about...
The story can get funny.
I was going to say, you just murdered a guy.
Fast forward about 6 months, and this is when this roller rink in Florissant was still around called Spinning Wheels, and that's where we always kind of played. That was our rink. So we're playing, we're doing our thing. Jason Disco and I, same guy that I just cut 6 months ago, fighting for a puck. Something happens where he's trying to swat my stick out of my hands, and his stick deflects off of mine,
and you
stick
got it
in the head.
Nice.
My parents get called at like 3 in the morning because that's when we were playing at Spinning Wheels at that time. 8 friggin' stitches, right square in the head. We legitimately gave each other stitches. And his, though, was completely innocent, like just legitimately an accident. And not that mine wasn't, but mine was stupid. Like his was just, he felt so bad. And he was convinced that he thought I did it on purpose. And I was like, nah, man, no. If anything, I did it. I'm still very sorry. So
if I'm him and we're that close of friends, I'm looking at you the moment that you hit me in the head and say, karma serves you right.
Well, because I had never had that sort of cut before on my head. I'd had stitches plenty of times. But, all of a sudden, everybody starts looking at me with this horrified, oh, God.
I was like, what?
And then also, too, I think somebody realized they had to call my parents because I was still living at home. So this must have been forever, 20 years ago or whatever. And so, somebody had to call my house at 3 in the morning. Mr. and Mrs. Mueller, we're here with Legend Don. At the time, that was my nickname, was Legend. And they're like, he's going to need to go to the hospital.
You buried the lead. This is the best part of the story.
How do you not open with my nickname was Legend in a league where I was terrible?
Yeah, well, it's because, all right, so as you can imagine, I was a bit of a fireball for the team.
What?
So I would provide motivation, and this is going to be a big shocker to you guys, but seemingly most of the other teams in which we played, I didn't really make a lot of friends.
Yeah.
They didn't seem to really like me very
threw
much.
The sticks at their face, too?
No, but I would get in there and, man, I played hard. I might not have been good, but I friggin' played hard, and there were some people that did not like that.
Could you imagine being woken up by the phone at 3 in the morning 20 years ago, so it's a landline, right? Somebody on the other end says that Legend
Dad has to get out of bed, walks to the kitchen to pick the phone up.
Yeah, and I remember, so my mom and dad, I can remember my mom and dad both coming to get me, which obviously they didn't have to or whatever. but like my mom, the look was just, I just want to make sure that you're okay. And my dad was like, I cannot friggin' believe that I am here right now. like, I want you to be okay. I love you to pieces, son. God, why couldn't this be at 8 o'clock at night as opposed to 3 o'clock in the morning?
I'm picturing this as mom's in the passenger seat looking at the back of the vehicle going like, Donnie, are you sure you're okay? And his dad's in the driver's seat going, honey, he's fine. His nickname's Legend.
Well, my dad was with me the first time that I ever got stitches, and I got stitches in my foot, and I had no idea of that numbing shot that they give you.
That's the good stuff.
Holy hell. Like that pain, I don't think I've ever really experienced anything like that's that bad. And so my dad kind of like knew that was coming. And right before he was like, this is going to get bad for a second, son. And boy, he was friggin' right. But yes, so that's my Queenie story there. And I did get somebody stitches there because I'm an absolute positive dumbass.
Yeah.
Dumbass.
Yeah.
All right, so guys, we got a new head coach, and what do you know? The team is winning. And I just want to say this from the start, and then we can kind of talk about however we want to talk about. Guys, the difference in how this team looks is apparent to anybody that watches them on a regular basis. They are doing things that they were not doing before. They're playing, I don't know, it's seemingly with a purpose more so than they ever have been before. A couple things here. One, it's great that Jim Montgomery is here, but two, why the hell were these guys not doing this with Drew Bannister when they were more than capable of it is kind of my only question. And I'm not trying to make it a negative. It's great. We're winning.
Yeah.
Awesome. But, boys, I think you had more in the tank than you were giving Coach Bannister.
I feel like deja vu. We probably had those conversations last year when Berube was fired and Drew Bannister took over, right? To where they won, what was it, the first 3 out of their 4 games, and it was like, wait, where was this all of a sudden? It is that new coach bump. But, man, I think the part that I've been most fascinated by with Montgomery has just been the details that the players play with. Like, there are certain aspects of their game that I haven't seen since those first couple of years of Craig Berube. Like, the way that they've won battles in the neutral zone, the way that they are able to sustain offensive zone time, net front presence, like, they're not missing the net anymore. Do you remember at the beginning of the season, JR, Bannister had said, like, it's a little concerning how much we are missing the net.
We even talked about that.
Yeah, like people were bringing up
maddening.
block shots, and he was like, I don't really care about the block shots. Missing the net was the problem. I looked at this a couple of nights ago. The first 10 games, 8 out of the 10, they had 20 or more missed shots. And now, I don't know what they were last night, but in the first 4 games, 3 of the first 4, they were in single digits missed shots. So, like, there are just certain aspects that I don't know if it's the players that have just taken that step. Part of me wonders if it's a group of guys that just needed some direction and details that I don't know if they had previously. But there are just some factors that look like Jim Montgomery has just kind of unlocked something in their brain when they're on the ice.
Yeah, I think so. And you got to preface it. I hate to do it every single time, but I really believe that Drew Bannister was put in a tough spot. Hey, we want to win now. We want to develop. You know, it's a retool. We're going to make mistakes, but oh man, we're not going to make the playoff. Okay, we need to make a change. That's a tough spot. But the way I equate it, guys, is this. Remember, 5th grade, you'd have your teacher, your regular teacher, and he'd be like, okay, we're going to take a test, get your pencils out, sit down. Hey, put your legs under the
Donnie
desk.
would chuck the pencil at the teacher's forehead.
Yeah, he probably would. Legend. But you had that teacher who did that, and that's, Drew. He's trying to come in and get these guys to straighten up, play the right way. Yeah. And then Jim Montgomery, who comes in, and he's got this huge resume, right? But he's the sub. Yeah. He comes in, all right, we're ordering pizza today, guys, and hey, what do you think? Right after that test, we're going to watch a movie. You just come to school with this feeling that, I want to be in this guy's classroom.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what it is right now with Jim Montgomery. And that's not to say that, the underlying thing here is he's making changes that are making them play better hockey. But when you make those tweaks and you add to it that these guys really want to be at the rink, that's the combination.
I do think there's something there, too, because the message when Bannister was hired was we're still a retooling team. And I wonder if some of the players on the team are like, no, we're done retooling. We want to compete now. Like, you do have a lot of veterans that are like, no, we don't want to be bad like we've been for the last couple of years. We want to compete. And look, that's not saying that the Blues didn't put that perspective out there, because Doug Armstrong had said at the moment Bannister was hired that, yeah, we want to retool still, but we believe we can compete for a playoff spot. All of the players at Media Day had said, like, no, yeah, we could fight for a playoff spot in this Western Conference. but maybe it felt like, and I don't know this, I'd have to ask the players, maybe it just felt like this might not be the guy that gets us to the playoffs, and that is kind of what leaked onto the ice and into the games.
All right, so guys, I've read a bunch about Coach Montgomery, about Monty. First of all, he can wear one of those like derby hats and look really cool,
good, didn't it?
which I completely respect. I would love to wear one of those, and I can't. But so.
It's like Hitch with that hat at the Winter Classic. I'm like, way to go, Hitch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody could pull that off.
But you
Yep.
rock the hell out of it. So from what I've read, Coach Montgomery is an analytics guy. He is deep into detail in the weeds of things. But then as I was listening to the game last night, I heard Chris Kerber talk about how, he's trying to not overwhelm the players with a lot of stuff. So it's just been little bits of information here and there. What is it that Montgomery's doing when he comes in? And how, what are the kind of things and conversations is he having with the players in those first couple of days? What little things are they doing to tighten up? Because it seems as though it's been a lot of little things that have made the difference over the course of these last few days. So what's the information that the players are getting, and how is it different than what it was from Bannister?
I think the biggest word is it's a process. That's what Jim Montgomery is all about. And you're listening to the interviews that he's done since he's taken over. That's what it's all about. So he doesn't come in the first day or the first couple days, first couple games, and say, we've got to do this better, and we've got to do X, Y, Z, all that better. Let's go. He doesn't do that. He comes in and he says, okay, hey, let's work on this. Let's first get this as close to what we want it to look like, and then we'll grow from there, and we'll move on. So he came in, and Alex, you talked about it. There was a lot of work in the neutral zone. Let's tighten. We saw it wasn't great with the Blues this year, and now so he's making some moves. In the practices, you can tell it. There's a lot of emphasis on what they're trying to teach structurally in the neutral zone, and it's tightened up. And I realize there's been a couple games where they gave up a lot of 2-on-1s. It's a work in progress.
Right.
And then, so once they can kind of get that, then they're branching out and working on some other things. We've seen the team really work better using the end of the ice, down low, open up some more offensive opportunities down there. But basically, I think what he's getting now is he's saying, hey, let's go make the plays. I know you guys can make plays. Look at Robert Thomas last night. Yeah, I know it's 3-on-3 overtime. That's not 5-on-5 hockey. But he says, hey, I'm going to go end this game, just like he did the other night when it was a turnover back the other way. But this time, it works out for him. So, I think it's little by little. He sees the big picture. He's got the 5-year contract. He knows that he's got time to develop this situation, and not everything needs to be fixed overnight.
Well, and he doesn't have any worries. That's the one thing that I felt awful for Drew Bannister. You can't really coach and be who you are because you got a 2-year deal, and you're taking over a team that's in this mushy middle, and you got to figure out how to win right now, and one mistake could be putting eyes on you. Jim Montgomery doesn't have that. Jim Montgomery can go out there and coach the way that he coaches because it's a 5-year deal. That was the commitment. And I don't know if you guys saw that first episode of the Road to the Winter Classic. I think it debuted on Wednesday. Man, the way that he communicates with his players, I think, is just fascinating. They showed 3 little snippets. One was he and Jordan Kyrou, and he was basically telling Kyrou, you're a great player. You need to go out there and believe that when you're on the ice. He's talking to Alex Texier and explaining to him, and Matthew Joseph, hey, I need you to be patient with me until I could get you in the game. But when I get you in the game, don't bleeping give up the spot. Go out there and play. He was talking to Zach Bolduc, and that was prior to that Rangers game where he was telling them, unleash hell on the goaltenders when you're around the net because you've got a shot. He's individually talking to each player the way that, frankly, they need to play the game rather than a mass conversation of this is what we need to do to have success, because every player is going to play that game a lot differently, which is what it feels like you're seeing now with the team. Yes, they're on the same page, but you have individuals that are playing to their expertise, whether it's Dylan Holloway's speed, Zach Bolduc's shot in the slot. You see guys like Jordan Kyrou that are winning puck battles. And I'll tell you what I find most fascinating with Montgomery. The other day he was talking about the process evaluation points that he has throughout his coaching tenure. And I didn't know anything about this. He's got simple points that he carries over to each team that he lets players know, this is what I expect you. These are the details. And so I went back and looked at the Athletic article when he was at Dallas and with Boston and just looked at some of them. One of them was they need to win 56% of their faceoffs. Well, if you look at how the Blues have been since Montgomery's taken over, really good in the faceoff dot. Don't take undisciplined penalties. And they've taken a couple. I think the other night they took a couple. Yeah, oops, have those. But win special teams battle. They've won the special teams battle in every single game that they have played since Monty took over. Net front presence, win that battle, they've had that. So it's really interesting when he says details. There are actually specifics that he's talking to his team about. And if you look at how the Blues have played in 5 games under him, they have fixed every one of those detailed areas.
Do you guys think that Jim Montgomery is the guy that can finally unlock Jordan Kyrou to his full ability as a Blues player, as a Blues forward?
Yeah, and I think part of the answer is that he already did, and not. I know you used the word fully. So a couple years ago when he was assistant, that wasn't necessarily fully. He wasn't the player that he is today in terms of his role.
Yeah.
But I think the fact in talking to Jordan a week or so ago, he said he has already taken us places. Like he has already shown us what we can do. So we have that faith in him. And Alex, he brings up the Road to the Winter Classic, that audio that you're hearing from Jim Montgomery on the ice. And what did he mention when he was talking to Kyrou one-on-one on the ice? You can hear the audio. He says that, hey, that's what I told Pasta in Boston. And so if you're Jordan Kyrou and you're sitting there, here's a guy who's had 100-point seasons, MVP, so on and so forth, and the coach who, helped, I don't want to give Montgomery all the credit for Pasta doing that, but he helped him get there, is telling you, hey, I can – why wouldn't you listen? So I really do think, to answer your question, that if there is a person on this planet who can help Jordan Kyrou score 40, 50 goals and put up 90, 100 points, it's Jim Montgomery.
But guys, and I'm not making this up, but and I'm not saying that it's all the time, but some of the things that we had not seen with Jordan Kyrou in the last couple of years seem to maybe not be as big of an issue this year, at least to me. It seems as though he's coming back and he's playing the other side of the rink more. It seems like he's hustling more and getting into more, board battles. I know that that's not sort of his game, but it just seems like he is playing both ends of the ice better than he ever has in his career, at least of me watching.
Well, I think it goes back to what Drew Bannister said before he got let go, Alex, is that Jordan Kyrou is playing winning hockey. He's playing team-first hockey a lot of nights. So, yes, there have been some mistakes, and he's been criticized.
And there's
going to
be, man.
There's going to be. There's going to be with every single player.
Yeah.
I know I'm getting tweets last night at me, you ripped Kyrou when he turns the puck over, not Robert Thomas. Well, Thomas is trying to make a play. He doesn't just fumble it in the neutral zone. So, there's going to be mistakes, but I really do think this is the first time that you've really seen him play team-first hockey.
Yeah, well, it's funny when you ask that question of, is Jim Montgomery the guy that gets Jordan Kyrou to his full potential? My first thought was no, because it's got to be Jordan Kyrou.
Yeah, that's true.
I think Montgomery's a really good earpiece to have for Jordan Kyrou,
That's a great point.
Jordan Kyrou's having a hell of a season right now. Why? Because I think Jordan Kyrou, and I give some credit to his teammates, because I know for a fact a lot of those guys took him and talked to him last season about we need you to take steps forward. That's on Jordan Kyrou. What we've seen from Jordan Kyrou this season, that's him making that change. And now he's seeing the benefits of it, because he's basically a point-per-game player. You're in the positive in terms of plus-minus. You're right, Donnie. He's playing in the defensive zone just as much as he's playing in the offensive zone. Jordan Kyrou decided to change the way that he played, because he could have continued to go about what he did 2 years ago of, I'm going to score 40 goals, and I don't really care if I'm minus 35. But he decided to change the style that he wanted to play, and now it's benefiting this team on the ice because of that winning hockey.
So, guys, are you seeing – so we all sort of know that the full no trade for Kyrou kicks in before next season, correct?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we have talked about over the course of the last year or so, with his highs and lows and struggles and, the booing after Berube got fired and the whole thing, is – I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I just wanted to see exactly what this kid can do, and it seems as though he is finally figuring it out. And whether it be him, whether it be Montgomery, Bannister, whatever, I'm just friggin' glad that it got to this point, because I think that this is why you stick with young players, that that there's going to be some ebbs and flows with their maturity, man. You can't give up on somebody that has so much freaking talent. I know it's going to be frustrating, but I feel as though with any young player that is skilled like that, there's ups and downs. Look at Bedard now in Chicago. Pedersen in Vancouver, the way that he started this year and the way that he was in the friggin' playoffs last year. If Kyrou would have performed like that in the playoffs, Blues fans would have lost their friggin' marbles. No. So it's just really nice to maybe see this maturity level and things start to catch up with this guy.
You're absolutely right. The only thing is, I think that it was warranted. And when I say warranted, I'm not trying to be overly critical, but what I'm saying is, Bedard's, I know it's just an example, but he's 19. There's other players in the league who are trying to figure it out, 22, 23, 24. You're talking about a 26-year-old guy
who's been here for a while
with a $64 million contract. So I feel like it's warranted when you don't see it. Now, you can stick with it, and you can cross your fingers and hope that it's going to turn. And guess what? I've seen a million players where they didn't catch on, and it never turned. And then all of a sudden they were 29 and weren't the player that they could have become. Now we're seeing it, so now we can sit here and say, okay, it was kind of worth the wait and worth it to stick with him, but there's a chance that it might not have. And so, and he still has some growing to do. But I think you're right. This position that he's put himself in and the team sticking with him, looks like it's going to pay off.
And I think a lot of this, too, is that's why you go out and hire Jim Montgomery. Like, again, I know this is awful because of Drew Bannister, but you bring in Jim Montgomery, and as Doug Armstrong put it, now the coach is not a question anymore.
Yep.
Now you evaluate everything else with your roster because you've got the guy who has a .690 winning percentage in his career in the National Hockey League. You've got that. We know this guy can coach superstars in David Pasternak. We know this guy can coach young players that turn out to be superstars. Now we need to see what the players look like under this coach that we know is a good teacher. I think that's what they did with Ken Hitchcock. Like, they brought in Ken Hitchcock because they were like, we know we got a team that can win, but do we have the players that want to play winning hockey? And lo and behold, now it's unfavorable for a lot of Blues fans, but they traded away T.J. Oshie when Ken Hitchcock was there because they wanted to bring in somebody who could get them to that next level.
We don't know when and one of the things I want to bring up, and I kind of have forgotten to make the point, is this is happening here. These last couple games without Falk, without Letty, which I feel like that kind of goes a bit under the radar as well, that two of your top freaking defensemen are not playing while, you're going on this nice little run. So, again, I just sort of kind of like the mojo that's building here right now.
Against some pretty damn good teams, too, in terms of the New York Rangers, who I knew were struggling at the time, but still, that's Shesterkin. That's a really good defense. The New Jersey Devils, which it didn't look good for 2 periods, but you still won the hockey game. Winnipeg Jets, and then the other night, you just pulled that victory off against a Calgary Flames team who were 10-3 when they were on home ice. So, you're not just doing this against the San Jose Sharks, the Chicago Blackhawks, and being like, yeah, but they're beating up on bad teams. You're beating up on what's supposed to be playoff caliber teams.
All on the road, too. And to your point, Donnie, I've heard Jamie Rivers talk about this. I've heard Joey Vitale talk about this. What do you think about this team now? I mean, is this a potential playoff team? Is this a contender? Because they're doing it without Falk the past couple games. Letty's been out forever. Now you just got Buchnevich back. We'll talk about him. I think that here's how I see the situation. I think they can be a good team if all these guys come back and they're healthy and they're contributing. But the Blues are going to have to get the production from the top 6 forwards. The bottom 6, you like the way that it's shaped up. The WTF line, it's looking good. Broberg and Parayko, let's talk about those guys too.
Yeah.
Like that top pair looks amazing. So if you can have let's just say a Ryan Suter and a Falk in the second pair, and now you get a Letty back in the third pair. I'm just not bumping him up to the second because you don't know what you got until you get him back. That's a pretty deep defensive core with a lot of experience, right? Broberg, Parayko, Letty, Suter, all these guys. So I think that they can be the team that Joey and Riv are talking about in terms of, a team that we didn't expect them to be the last month or so. Can they get back in this? Here's the key, though. 9 out of 10 points, you got to do that in a lot of segments remaining on the schedule to be able to get back into that picture. I realize they're only a couple points out, but you've got to get 6 or 7 out of 10 a lot of, the rest of the season to make this happen.
So here's why I think they are a team that can compete for a playoff spot. I don't think they're a competitive team in the playoffs, although Jordan Binnington can steal you a series. The Western Conference has allowed you to be bad in the early portion of the season and still stay in this thing. And now that you're starting to find your feet, sure, it's a new coach bump, but at some point that bump falls off and then you fall back on your details. And Jim Montgomery seems to really be emphasizing your details. You play out of the final 43 games. On January 1st, they play 43 games to end the regular season. There are only 9 games played against the Eastern Conference in that time frame. So I think that terrible math quickly by me, 34 of 43, that is all played against the Western Conference.
And a lot against the Central, too, because they've played just 5 games against the Central so
and
far.
There's your 4-point swings. Like I said last night, they were in the midst of, and I guess Winnipeg shouldn't be in there, but last night against Calgary started a 5-game stretch of a 4-point swing stretch. They play Calgary, they play Edmonton, they play Vancouver, you play San Jose, which is only a couple of points behind you right now, and then the Dallas Stars, who are 5 points ahead of you. Like, those are 4-point games that put you back into the conversation. And if you can run the table, and let's say you have a .550 winning percentage against the Western Conference down the stretch, well, now you're talking about being in one of the wild card spots. I don't think you're a top 3 team in the Central. I think that's pretty easily going to be Winnipeg, Minnesota, and Dallas. I think what it comes down to is you're fighting with the Vancouvers, the Calgarys, the Edmontons, the Colorados for one of those 2 wild card spots.
Well, speaking of Edmonton, I would believe that tomorrow night when the Blues play Edmonton, that Edmonton will be more than fired up to play the Blues. Obviously, it's the first time that the 2 teams have played since Offer Sheet Madness 2024,
Nice.
when Doug Armstrong
It's got a name.
It does have a name.
absolutely hoisted Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway from Edmonton. I have a couple questions about those guys specifically, and then we can kind of talk about the game and Edmonton and where their head is about all of this. But guys, obviously been so impressed with Broberg and Holloway. These guys signed 2-year contracts at the start of this season. Question 1, when does Doug Armstrong go to those guys to start working out long-term deals? And 2, and I know that that's like kind of jokey, but like,
Oh, no, it's not jokey.
I mean, what do these guys' next deal look like? I mean, I would assume for Broberg, it's probably 6 or 8 years. Does Holloway get 6 as well? What does the money look like to that? Because to me, it looks like, A, we got to keep these guys here for as long as we can get them, and they are going to get goddamn paid.
Well, I'd like to point out first that Broberg, reminder, everybody said that you were overpaid when the offer sheets were signed. So that's a deal on the other side, a little discount probably. No, that was sarcastic.
Yeah, doubtful.
To answer, you go to them the minute this offseason kicks in because they can't negotiate until there's 1 year left on their deal,
You have to do it with a multi-year deal. You have to do it within that final year.
Okay.
So
July
it's going to have
1,
to
you
be
can
July
start.
1.
Yeah.
I would approach them right away. Now, I don't know because they're both still RFAs. So, do you buy out a couple of years of the RFA or do you just go straight into it with them? You pay these guys, though, because, one, Broberg, absolutely. That's the number 1 defenseman. We're 13 games into him with his injuries, and he's a point-per-game player. He's a net positive when he's on the ice. I'm a little surprised he wasn't on Team Sweden for the Four Nations tournament, but the injury probably did that. He's the one that I think you approach immediately because that's a part of your future. And honestly, Dylan Holloway's projecting that way as well. I think if you get those 2 guys done, now you've got pretty much your roster set for the foreseeable future, and then you can adjust elsewhere with what the salary looks like.
That's the one thing I remember throughout all this that I tried to point out was they were like $4.58 million for Philip Broberg. Now, I was obviously projecting that he'd be a good player because he's 6'4", 220 pounds. But I said, listen, don't live in the present time for a minute. Step back and think, okay, in 3 to 4 years, if this guy is who the Blues think he can be, who the hell is going to remember when they overpaid him $4.5 million?
I don't think Edmonton's saying that right now.
Nobody's saying that. He's going to be making $7, $8 million, $10 million, potentially in a few years. So, and Holloway too. So, it's worked out unbelievable. I tweeted a couple days ago, Donnie, or maybe I had an article that you read that said that St. Louis's 2 best players, because Robert Thomas has been good, Kyrie's been good, don't get me wrong, but Holloway, in terms of what he's brought, and Broberg on the other end, I said St. Louis 2 best players, and I think it was an Edmonton response, and they said if those 2 guys are St. Louis's 2 best players, that says more about St. Louis. And I'm like, buddy, have you been watching the game?
I don't think so. Edmonton, apparently, at least the reports around national media is they're looking for a top 4 defenseman. Really? You're looking. You had it, and apparently the Blues overpaid for that one. So I can't wait to see the reaction. And I know Dylan Holloway told you, JR, that I plan on getting booed. I don't know if Edmonton's going to boo them as much as they're like. I'm really curious if they put a picture of Stan Bowman up on the jumbotron.
That's where the boo should go.
Because if anybody's booing, it should be towards the general manager who said, "No, we don't need him. We need Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson," who, by the way, Philip Broberg has more points than both of those players combined. Dylan Holloway has more points than both of those players combined. But those were the guys that they opted for.
And just real quick, I always like to take fans behind the scenes a little bit. And so when I went in the locker room last week to talk to Broberg and Holloway, you just have to, I don't know these guys, but they just got here. But even if you were in the locker room every day, it'd be tough to get to know a Philip Broberg because he's so laid back, quiet. And so as I took the questions about going back to Edmonton to both of those guys, and I asked them about, do you think the reaction? What do you think? Broberg's like, oh, I'm just, happy to be here in St. Louis, and it's a new situation, good situation. And then when I asked Holloway, oh yeah, we'll probably get booed, but I don't know how they're gonna react. I love the fans, but oh yeah, they're probably, I'd imagine we'd be booed. Like,
just let it flow.
These two guys are night and day different in terms of talking to them.
I love it.
I wonder too, like. To a certain degree, man, do you think any player that maybe this is dumb, but look forward to it? Because honestly,
you got to if you're a player.
I would think if I'm going into Chicago as a Blues player and they're booing me, I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would think that. So, boy, that's going to be fantastic.
I think Kelly Chase had said that before. They booed me. It means I was doing my job well.
Absolutely.
I'm writing a story. I know I've been writing it for a couple of years now, but I'm writing a story about Robert Thomas, and I didn't realize this until I did the interview. And he got drafted. The draft was in Chicago, and because it was the Blues pick, he got booed. He goes, oh, this is going to be great.
Hey, real quick about Robert Thomas, and I assume that this was because of his injury, but how come he wasn't on a Four Nations roster?
Yeah, I've heard a couple of people say that, I don't think it's a snub because he didn't earn it. Which, I mean, if you look at the start of his season, I don't know if he played well. I would have put him on the roster, though. Just looking at Team Canada's, they're strong down the middle. There's no question. But Anthony Cirelli over Robert Thomas. I mean, Thomas was nearly a 100-point player last season, but that was last season. I do think injury played a part of it, and I would say I'll go out on a limb. I think Thomas is on Team Canada for the Olympics next year.
Yeah, he could be. And snub, no snub. I mean, it's so hard to argue when you talk about that depth that they have.
Canada's got a lot of them.
Team Canada. But I will say this. If you have Jim Montgomery at the start of the year, Pavel Buchnevich playing on the wing at the start of the year, and Robert Thomas not being injured like he was, if you had a perfect situation for Robert Thomas, I think there could have been a chance. Mm-hmm. But, I think that with Buchnevich at center, the line was just kind of mixed match. So I think that it was tough for Robert Thomas to put himself in position to convince them to put him over there.
I thought the bigger snub was Broberg. Looking at Team Sweden, and again, he injured too, so I can understand that. But even injured, I would have had Broberg on that roster over Erik Karlsson. I don't know if I'm having Erik Karlsson on my team. Now, it's the Four Nations tournament. It's not the Olympics, so maybe things change. I get that that's like the king of Sweden these days without Henrik Lundqvist around, but I don't know if I'm trying to win for my country and I'm going to have a defenseman who's a minus 18.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was trying to picture that Team Sweden meeting when they were doing the roster, and they were just like, well, we like Broberg. Okay, are you going to go tell Karlsson he's
who's going to tell him that?
Guys, I have to tell you, and not in a way that I used to dislike Chris Draper or any of those guys, but I do not care for him in the slightest.
Karlsson?
I feel like he's.
Is it still from the San Jose Sharks comment of the hand pass game?
No, man.
That's mine.
No, man. It's because he is an ishy defenseman.
No.
But he scores a bunch. He gets but you're bad at your job. You do part of your job terribly, one part really well, so to me that makes you okay.
Yeah.
But I don't understand. I am out on that guy. And it feels as though every time that he goes to a team, because of what he gets paid, he blows the hell up out of that team's cap. I mean, look what he's doing in Pittsburgh.
I like the fact that he just blasted Karlsson, but he's still not up where Draper is in his hatred chart.
I was going to say, should I ruin Donnie's life? Chris Draper's actually one of the nicest dudes you'll ever meet.
Listen,
I'm guessing he doesn't care.
No. That's fine. I never want to meet him. That Jordan Tutu guy, remember him?
Oh, yeah. A Duke Nashville?
Never want to meet him.
I've never met him, so I don't
Darren
know.
McCarty, never want to meet him. Listen, they could be, god dang, the second coming of the friggin' Pope, but I want absolutely no part of any of them. I'll walk past them on the street if I see them. Give them a dirty look while I'm
How do you
doing
feel like Kirk Maltby?
Oh.
I think he's around a lot. He's the scout, I think, for Detroit. I always see him in the box.
Actually, he might be on my mountaintop.
We need to invite Donnie to one of those games that he's there.
That'd be
Just
awesome.
walk past.
Well, I wouldn't do anything. I'm already so intimidated when I'm up there anyway. I don't want to make eye contact with anybody.
Donnie walks by when he's at the food court and he just slaps the plate out of his hand.
No, Alex.
Serves you right, Kirk.
You know, it'd be perfect is he wouldn't know what they look like. You know, we see him up there every night, and he wouldn't know what they look like. So you sit down, hey, this is Bill. You know, just
just start introducing him.
He'd talk to him for 10 minutes.
This is
by
Scout
the way,
from Detroit. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
By the way, that was Kirk Maltby.
I think I would remember what he looked like. I think I do. Maybe not so, but if so, then you would have
Donnie
a hell of
knocks
a-
his plate on the floor. Pick it up, Kirk.
And I get my friggin' pass revoked and I get pummeled all in the same friggin' visit to the press box. And also, too, listen, I am excited about this Four Nations thing. I do not mean to be Debbie Downer guy, and I know that I'm going to be Debbie Downer guy, and I understand why they're not there, and I'm not saying that they should be there, but to me, when Russia is not a part of something like this, when it comes to ice hockey, I appreciate it. I understand. I'm not saying they should be in again, but I mean,
I'm hoping they figure out whatever it is they need to figure out for the Olympics.
Yes.
That's going to be tough. That's going to be tough not having a Team Russia. How does that work, by the way? Because since it's a Four Nations tournament now, is it a regular thing moving forward? Like, do they substitute the All-Star game moving forward with Four Tourney? Or is it just because it's the year before the Olympics?
From what I've heard, gathered, I don't think it's a permanent thing.
So it's just now.
It could be some, you know, you got these guys, Crosby and McDavid, who might not be able to play together ever internationally, you know, if they don't play together at this next Olympics. And also there was some, you know, up in the airness, is that a word? Whether they'd be at the Olympics. So they said, hey, and the other biggest thing is like they're going to collect the money on this thing where they're not at the Olympics. So, you know, potentially for money reasons, it could become a permanent thing.
So then if Russia gets back into the conversation in the future, does it go beyond a Four Nations tournament? Do you make it like a six-nation? Like, because you would imagine Russia's going to be in that, but then who's the other? Is it a Five Nations tournament? Like, I'm curious how they take this moving forward, because I am so beyond excited that the All-Star game is not a thing. Like, I am ecstatic that is gone. I actually have a week of hockey to look forward to, whereas it was 3 days that I wanted nothing to do with.
I hate that All-Star game.
It's boring, man.
I don't like it at all. I haven't liked it since I was a kid and Ally Afraidy was in the slap shot competition.
Even when they change it up, and it's still boring.
What a name reference.
I just remember, man, sitting in my buddy's living room with his dad and just watching Ally Afraidy just drop bombs, man.
Chuck a stick at his head.
And even no, I did not. Man, Brandon's dad would have kicked my ass. And he was also my baseball coach, so I'd have been stuck in right field like all of
game over.
Friggin' all of the time. So all right, let's just do a little backtracking here. We have talked about our St. Louis Blues. We've talked about the impact in which the Jim Montgomery has made and how the team looks different. We have talked about what maybe those next couple deals are gonna, or that next deal is gonna look like for Broberg and Holloway. The Edmonton game tomorrow night. The team is on this really difficult Western Canada swing. They're, the game in Calgary last night, I don't think 2 weeks ago that's a game that they get. I think that's a game that they probably end up losing in regulation. So even though it looked a little ugly at times, they still got out of there with 2 friggin' points. And again, I feel as though just the way that the team is overall playing and fighting is different than it was.
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, there's been 2 games where it hasn't looked pretty. And it was the Devils' second and third period, and then it was that Flames' second and third period. Or, I'm sorry, the first and third period. But the Flames one, I feel like, was a little bit more explainable. Like, listening to Montgomery talk and listening to Shen talk, there was just a disconnect on the ice. Like, the passes weren't there. Like, the exits out of the zone were slow. Like, I think Shen said, like, all 5 of us weren't on the same page. And that's going to happen. To me, those are, like, teachable areas to where it's like, yeah, it didn't look good. You go back to the rink the next day and you fix that problem. earlier in the season when games looked ugly, it was like, I don't know how they're going to fix this because there was no offensive zone time. They were one and done. They were taking shots. That wasn't the case against Calgary. Like, sure, you couldn't get out of your zone a couple of times, but when you got into the other side, you were generating offense. Your net front presence was solid. So I don't know. I felt like the 2 games under Montgomery when they haven't looked pretty have been one of those that you look at and you're like, yeah, but you can fix that in one practice.
Yeah, and they're still coming. Like, they're still trying to finish the game strong, even when things aren't going well. And Bannister had them in a lot of close games. They could just never find that goal.
Couldn't close it out.
Yeah, so, those 8-1 games, I realize you're going to have one or so, every 10 years. The Blues had 2 of them in the same season.
Not in the same week,
same
I
month.
think it was.
But I mean, just think, when it was 3-1-4, all of a sudden, that's it. You mail it in. And, with this team, even as bad as it's been at points, like New Jersey and like that game, you still feel like you're watching a team that could pull it out.
Yeah. Their offense looks different, too, by the way. Like, I don't think this team's going to be a high-powered offense yet. I still think they're waiting on a couple of pieces to get there for them. But this offense, at least now, before it felt like it's only going to put up 2 goals a night. Now it feels like they have the potential to put up 4 if they need to.
And speaking of one of those pieces, Dalibor Dvorsky has been catching fire in Springfield, correct?
Yeah.
He's been playing really well.
I think the month of November he had 10 points in 11 games. It was 5 goals and 5 assists. He was just named Team Slovakia for the World Juniors once again. So it's another kind of feather in the hat for Dalibor Dvorsky's last couple of seasons.
So how, obviously you don't want to rush the kid, but if he keeps playing the way that he is, then you would expect to see him in St. Louis before year's end, or no?
I think it all depends on where the team's at. That's going to be the big thing. I don't think they could. I could be wrong. I don't think they have a plan. Hey, we're going to bring him up X month. Rain or shine. I think it's going to be, where's the team at? How are the guys playing up front where they would put him, and do they think he could handle it at this point? I could see him up here contributing, and I could see him, maybe they wait towards the end of the year and make a move like that.
Yeah, part of me, in pure speculating here, I wonder if it's post-trade deadline. I wonder if post-trade deadline you look at it and you say, okay, depending on what our roster looks like, additions, subtractions, injuries, now is the opportunity. Do you bring them up for the stretch run? Because what I find interesting is that on top of the Snuggerud factor.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Because if you make the Frozen Four, which, his team's like top 3 in college hockey,
right,
you're not talking until the first or second
last
week
game
of April.
or 2, yeah.
Yeah, so you're not getting until maybe 3, maybe 4 games of the season.
I got one more thing here before the end of the podcast. I meant to start off with this. Hey, I'm not sure if we have any listeners in Ottawa, but if we don't, or even if you know that you can put this in the ears of the Ottawa Senators fans, guys, I understand how unhappy you are sometimes with Brady Tkachuk, and maybe he just isn't one of the guys that you need for your rebuild going forward.
Can't control his temper.
I sort of think that maybe you should kind of keep up your vocal distaste for Brady. Please, go ahead. I think it's super, super smart. It's what you should do to better your team going forward, to run Brady Tkachuk out of Ottawa after he's made a commitment to your city and to your franchise. But please, please, keep running it. Please, please.
Sign the legend.
I was just going to say, I need to, Photoshop a little, line above Donnie's head on that part that says, the more you know with the legend.
You made your case.
Bunch of idiots.
What, man?
No, sorry. Brilliant hockey fans.
I think Doug Armstrong's down the hallway.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Go
we'll
tell
go
him that.
pass that along, too.
I'll throw a little, because, man, he didn't think of the Montgomery thing until the day after he got fired, so I'm sure he's not thinking about Brady Tkachuk or anything going forward.
No.
All right, 4, our dude, Jeff Burton, we miss you so freaking much. Every time the Blues play the Sharks and I see Clem Costin, I think
Clem
of you.
Shady.
From The Athletic, Jeremy Rutherford, Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, I'm Donnie Fandango. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and as always, let's go Blues!
The Last Minute Blues Podcast. Hear more at 1054 at 7thepoint.com.